Welcome to StopFake, the place where we debunk disinformation about Ukraine and set the record straight. I'm Irena Chalupa, and I'm happy to present this week's edition. Among this week's fakes, should he stay or should he go? Is Odessa really trying to dismantle the historic statue of its first governor? President Poroshenko bans Chernobyl benefits that actually never were. Ukrainians on the road to EU visa-free travel despite Dutch referendum results. That and more in this week's edition of Stop Fake News. So let's get to it. Will the Duke survive in Odessa? Asked the Russian publication Rossiyskaya Gazeta on April 5th. Decommunization is making inroads in Ukraine. Odessa Governor Saakashvili orders the removal of Soviet monuments, writes the publication. Rossiyskaya Gazeta mixes up Odessa the oblast, province, with Odessa the city. Saakashvili is governor of the entire Odessa province, and his executive order and the list of communist monuments to be dismantled was published on the Odessa Oblast website. Ukraine is removing all manner of communist monuments from its streets and plazas, in line with a decision taken by parliament to do away with statuary representing the authoritarian Soviet period in the country's history. Thousands of Lenins and other communist figures have been removed from the squares of cities, towns, and villages. Odessa's beloved Duke, whose statue stands on top of the city's famous Potemkin steps leading down into the harbor, was many things, but never a communist. Armand Emmanuel de Plessis, Duke de Richelieu, was a French nobleman, soldier, and statesman. He served as governor of Odessa from 1803 to 1815 and was highly regarded for his progressive administration of the city. He remains a much-loved figure in local history. Having just returned from Odessa, I can vouch that the Duke statue remains as popular as ever. No one would dream of dismantling this statue, so it's safe to say he ain't going anywhere. On the eve of the 30th anniversary of the 1986 Chernobyl nuclear disaster, the Russian news and current affairs site Ukraina.ru published a story claiming that President Poroshenko had stripped Chernobyl liquidators and all those who had participated in the cleanup operation of their benefits. According to Ukraina.ru, President Poroshenko cut those benefits because there's not enough money in the state budget to cover them. This information is completely inaccurate. Chernobyl accident liquidators have not been stripped of any of their previous state benefits and perks. Among their many benefits is the free use of public transport as well as the country's railroads. Earlier this year, the Ukrainian parliament passed a law, number 2093, expanding benefits for Chernobyl liquidators. However, President Poroshenko vetoed that law. The Russian website Vesti reported that the European Commission intends to ignore the results of the recent Dutch referendum, in which a majority voted against the EU association and free trade agreement with Ukraine, and introduce visa-free travel for Ukrainians. Visa-free travel to the EU for Ukrainians and the EU association agreement are two completely separate issues. Ukraine's negotiations on visa-free travel to the EU began in 2008 during the EU-Ukraine Paris summit. This was during the presidency of the pro-Western Viktor Yushchenko. The Visa Liberalization Action Plan was signed in 2010. 4 years later, the second phase of this plan went into effect, and it is expected that by the end of this year, 2016, Ukrainians will be able to travel to EU countries without visas. The EU-Ukraine Association Agreement obliges both sides to abide by previously signed agreements on freedom of movement. The Netherlands referendum had nothing to do with a visa-free travel regimen for Ukraine, and the Dutch voters did not render an opinion on this issue in the April 6th poll. Vesti's claim that the EU is ignoring the referendum result is false and a distortion of the referendum itself. The Russian site Ukraina.ru published a story attributed to the Bloomberg news agency, claiming that the recent Dutch referendum on the EU association agreement was President Petro Poroshenko's last chance at remaining in power. The story Ukraina.ru refers to is an opinion piece published by the Bloomberg View and does not necessarily reflect the opinion of the Bloomberg editorial board or its owners. Dutch voters snub Kyiv, not Brussels, writes Bloomberg View columnist Leonid Bershytsky, a prominent Russian journalist who immigrated to Germany from Russia in 2014. Bershytsky was the founding editor of Russia's business daily Vedomosti and publisher of the Russian edition of Forbes. According to Ukraina.ru, Bershytsky claims that in the course of 2 years, the Kyiv regime has managed to alienate all of European society against Ukraine. These words, however, are nowhere to be found in the Bershytsky piece. While Bershytsky writes that President Poroshenko has squandered 2 years without accomplishing much in real reforms, what he actually wrote is the following, quote, "Though the increasingly unpopular Poroshenko himself has dismissed the referendum as strategically not an obstacle on Ukraine's path to Europe, it may well be one of the final blows to his ability to hold on to power." End quote. There is no mention of the referendum being Poroshenko's last chance. Bershytsky simply maintains that the referendum result will be problematic for the Ukrainian president. That's it for this week. Our video digest only presents a small amount of the fakes we debunk every week. Look for fresh fakes set straight on the StopFake website. Be vigilant, look out for fakes, and if you spot any disinformation about Ukraine, forward it to us. We'll do a truth autopsy. We'll see you next week. I'm Irena Chalupa, and this is StopFake. Thanks for watching.